Hello all, and welcome to our final video of the week. And in this video we are going to be working on describing our data or running descriptives on our data for our ratio and interval level variables. So as you remember, we're running some Xenia data we created. You're running the data that you created, where you have two nominal, two ordinal, and two interval ratio data or variables. And so to do this, interval ratio are reported a little bit differently than nominal and ordinal, and that is we need to report the mean and the standard deviation. We don't have to mess with the frequency and percent, and so it goes a little bit faster. So to do this, we are going to do the height in inches variable and the days to bloom variable for our Xenia data set. So I'm going to go to the bottom of those columns, and I'm going to type in mean and standard deviation. Okay, as you remember from the reading, the standard deviation is a measure of, on average, how far is a data set away from the middle. And then the mean, of course, is just the average of the data set. So to do this, Excel makes it super easy. We'll go underneath our first variable and we'll type in equal and then average. Left parentheses, we'll click on the bottom data point, shift control and the up arrow to go to the top, and then enter. And that'll give us the mean for that data set, or the variable. Then for the next one, we'll do equals and the same thing, average. Left parentheses, click on the bottom data point, control shift up arrow, enter. There you have it. So what this tells us is, on average, our zinnias were 34.1 inches tall, and on average, our zinnias bloomed 85 2/3 day after sowing. So the next one is our standard deviation. So to do that, you do STDEV, and then you have two options. You have STDEV dot, you can do P for population or S for sample. Sample standard deviation is going to be a little more conservative than population standard deviation. Any data set with over, say, a couple hundred data points, it's not going to make a meaningful difference. But since this is a sample of all zinnias produced, we're going to do the sample. STDEV dot S. Oops. STDEV S, push tab there, and it'll bring up the parentheses. Click on your bottom data point, control shift up arrow, and push enter. And then, rather than typing that all in, you can just shift this over to the right, and it'll run the standard deviation for the second data set. Now, so this means that on average, our plants were 14 inches away from the mean, and on average, a plant bloomed within basically 22 days of the average. In statistics, we really like to have a small standard deviation because that means our data is grouped up, and so we can find the real source of error versus just a random source of error, at least here. So generally, small standard deviations are better than big standard deviations. But for this data set, it doesn't matter. We're just reporting descriptives. So then we're going to copy this whole column, Control C, and then make a new tab in your workbook. Click there and paste it. We want to paste special to get rid of any sort of any functions, so we'll do values only. And then you'll see down there we have our standard deviation and mean. We don't need the data set. We don't need the actual values, so delete those. We need to save the label, delete everything else. We need mean reported to one decimal place, traditionally, and we need standard deviation reported to one more decimal place than mean. So in this case, we'll report that to 2 decimal places. There you go. And then, as you remember from the last table we made, we need to report the variable names on the left-hand side, and then the statistical measures all across the top. So in this case, mean and standard deviation. And of course, you can just manually transpose those and be just fine. But when you're working on a huge data set with like hundreds of variables and hundreds of measures and whatnot, that's terrible. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. So what we can do, we can make Excel do it for us. So I'm going to highlight that data, do Control C to copy it, and then I'm going to click over here, and then anywhere, then do paste special, and then down here, click that transpose. And what that does, it just flips your data set 90 degrees. So we have it like we need it for the APA table. We have the mean, then we have the standard deviation with the variables along the left-hand side. Then copy that critter, Control C, go to Word, Control V to paste, and then we can format this. First thing, we need to get it all in the same font because Excel and Word can't agree on the same font. So that way the whole document's in the same font then. Right-click on it, Auto-Fit to Window. And then I like to always do this while viewing the grid lines. Click on the top row, do a new row above there, and we'll title this critter. We'll call this Table 2. And we'll call it days to bloom and height. We can merge those together. And then this one's going to be italic. APA says that every single column needs to have a header, so we'll call this the parameter. In actual function, a lot of authors will leave that heading off, and that cell will be blank, and that you're not going to go to jail for that. But APA wants you to have a column heading in there. And then these dudes, that needs to be centered. These all need to be centered. Control E to center them. These dudes, since they're statistical terms, need to be put in italics. We never say standard deviation in these tables. We always say SD. This needs to be capitalized. Same with these. The first letter needs to be capitalized. That's a highlight it and then Shift F3. And then center all the data. Now, because all of this is reported to this with the same number of digits, the decimals already line up. But if they had different number of digits, we would need to do the decimal tab instead to make the decimals line up. And then we need to start putting in some borders. Let's put a border underneath there. Let's put a border underneath there. That's Control Y to redo the last command. And a border under there. Okay. Click on it, and then we'll do layout. Get rid of the grid line so we can see the print preview. Oh, we need to do our N, our sample size. In this case, I'm using a capital N to designate that we looked at all data that in our set. You know, if we were talking about just the zinnias grown in like the north plot versus all plots, we would use little n, but we're talking about all the zinnias, we're going to use big N. So there you have it, guys. There is the descriptive statistics for the interval and ratio level data. I apologize for the speed of this video, but I figure if you need to hear it again, you can always stop and rewind and watch it again, and that way I don't bore anybody that has a pretty good handle on this already. If you have any questions, be sure and send me a quick email, and I'll do my best to get back to them as soon as I can. All right, you guys have a great week, and I'll talk to you again next week.